Why spiritually awake people are quietly disappearing. Aldous Huxley was right. They're vanishing. Not in body, but in spirit. The awakened ones, the seekers, the souls who once burned with divine hunger are now silent. And if you're watching this, you might be next. Aldous Huxley warned us. In his final years, haunted by the very dystopia he'd written, he whispered a prophecy that most dismissed as paranoia. There will be a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude. He saw it coming, the spiritual anesthesia, the soul-numbing comfort that would make us forget we were ever meant to fly. Today, I'm going to show you why the spiritually awake are disappearing. Not because they're being hunted, not because they're hiding, but because something far more sinister is happening, something that Huxley understood with terrifying clarity. And before we're done, you'll understand why this might be the most important message you hear this year. Do you remember the last time you had a conversation about God that made your soul tremble? Not a casual chat, not a religious debate, but a real, raw, earth-shattering encounter with the divine through another human being? When was it? Can you even remember? That silence you're hearing right now, that void in your memory, that's the disappearance I'm talking about. 10 years ago, coffee shops buzzed with spiritual conversations. People argued about meaning, about purpose, about the nature of reality itself. Bookstores had entire sections dedicated to spiritual awakening. Strangers would lock eyes and recognize something deeper, something eternal in each other. Now, silence. Oh, everyone's still talking. The noise has never been louder. But listen carefully. Beneath the chaos, beneath the endless content, beneath the millions of words being spoken every second, there's a deafening spiritual silence. The awakened ones aren't speaking anymore. They're not writing. They're not gathering. They're not even seeking. They're scrolling. Huxley wrote in Brave New World about soma, a drug that would make oppression feel like paradise. He imagined a future where people would choose their chains because the chains felt so comfortable, where slavery would be painted in colors so beautiful that freedom would seem ugly by comparison. He was right, but he underestimated the delivery system. It's not a pill. It's not a drug you swallow. It's a screen you can't stop touching. It's a feed that never ends. It's a dopamine drip so perfectly calibrated that it makes divine ecstasy seem boring. Let me ask you something, and I need you to be honest with yourself, not with me, but with your own soul. When was the last time you sat in complete silence for 30 minutes? No phone, no music, no distraction, just you and the infinite. Did you feel uncomfortable just hearing that question? Did something in you immediately start making excuses? I'm too busy. I have responsibilities. I'll do it later. That discomfort, that resistance, that's not you. That's the program. The spiritually awake are disappearing because awakening has become uncomfortable, inconvenient, inefficient. We live in a world that has optimized everything except the soul. You can order food in seconds, find information instantly, connect with anyone, anywhere. But sitting with God, that takes time. That requires patience. That demands something our culture has taught us to hate, waiting. And waiting feels like dying in a world addicted to instant gratification. So the seekers stopped seeking. The awakened ones pressed the snooze button. The prophets traded their fire for followers, their truth for trends, their eternal perspective for viral moments. They didn't lose their faith. They just forgot why they believed in the first place. Huxley's most chilling insight wasn't about oppression. It was about entertainment. He wrote, "A really efficient totalitarian state would be one in which the all-powerful executive of political bosses and their army of managers control a population of slaves who do not have to be coerced because they love their servitude." Look around. We're living in that state. But the managers aren't politicians, they're algorithms. The slaves aren't in chains, they're holding smartphones. And the servitude isn't forced. It's chosen moment by moment, scroll by scroll, click by click. I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm being surgical. The spiritually awakened are disappearing because spiritual awakening requires something we've been systematically trained to avoid: discomfort. Real awakening is uncomfortable. It strips away illusions. It shatters comfortable lies. It demands that you face parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. It requires you to sit with pain, wrestle with doubt, endure the dark night of the soul. But we've created a culture where discomfort is the ultimate enemy, where any negative emotion can be immediately medicated, either with actual drugs or with digital ones, where suffering is seen as a design flaw rather than a doorway to transformation. And so the awakened ones made a choice, often unconsciously. They chose comfort over consciousness. They chose distraction over depth. They chose the shallow end of the pool because the deep end was too dark, too uncertain, too terrifying. I want you to feel something right now. Feel the weight of this truth. Every great spiritual master in history, Jesus in the desert, Buddha under the Bodhi tree, Moses on the mountain, Muhammad in the cave, they all had one thing in common. They were alone. They were uncomfortable. They were confronted with themselves in a way that couldn't be escaped or distracted from. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you were truly alone with your soul? But here's where it gets even more disturbing. The spiritually awake aren't just disappearing into distraction. They're disappearing into counterfeit awakening. We live in an age of spiritual entertainment, of enlightenment as content, of awakening as a brand. Social media is flooded with spiritual teachers who've never spent a day in real solitude, with enlightenment gurus who check their follower count more than they check their conscience, with awakening content that's designed not to transform you, but to keep you watching. Huxley saw this too. In his follow-up essay, Brave New World Revisited, he wrote, "The victim of mind manipulation does not know that he is a victim. To him, the walls of his prison are invisible. The modern spiritual seeker doesn't realize they're trapped because the trap is decorated with spiritual imagery. It's got the right vocabulary: awakening, consciousness, higher self, divine feminine, sacred masculine. It sounds deep. It feels profound, but it's empty. It's awakening without the cross, enlightenment without sacrifice, transformation without death of the ego. It's spiritual junk food, high in calories, zero in nutrition. And maybe, just maybe, you're one of them. Maybe you've been consuming spiritual content for years, feeling like you're growing, like you're awakening, like you're on the path. You've got the crystals. You've learned to meditate. You follow the right teachers. You use the right words. But in the quiet moments, in those rare seconds when the noise stops, you feel it, don't you? That emptiness. That haunting sense that something's missing. That gnawing feeling that despite all your spiritual seeking, you're not actually any closer to God than you were 5 years ago. You've been disappearing too. Not all at once. Not dramatically, but slowly, imperceptibly, like a photograph fading in the sun. The fire you once had, that burning desire to know truth, to touch the infinite, to surrender everything for one moment of divine encounter, it's dimmed. And you've gotten so used to the darkness that you've forgotten what real light looks like. This is the tragedy of our age. Not that people are anti-spiritual, but that they're spiritually distracted. Not that they've rejected God, but that they've replaced him with spiritual entertainment that never quite satisfies, but always promises that the next video, the next teaching, the next revelation will be the one. Huxley's final words before he died were, LSD 100 micrograms. Even at death's door he was seeking. But seeking what? An experience? A feeling? A transcendence that could be chemically manufactured? What if the real awakening he spent his life searching for was available all along, but he was looking in the wrong places? But here's what Huxley didn't see. Here's what the dystopian prophets couldn't imagine. God is still speaking. And he's not speaking through algorithms or trends or spiritual content. He's speaking in the silence. The spiritually awake aren't disappearing forever. They're being called out, called away, called into the wilderness where real awakening happens. Because here's the truth that will set you free. You were never meant to find God through a screen. You were never meant to experience divine awakening through curated content. You were never designed to meet your Creator through a highlight reel of someone else's spiritual journey. You were meant for encounter, for wrestling like Jacob, for burning like Moses, for surrendering like Mary, for dying like Christ. And that kind of awakening can't be manufactured, marketed, or monetized. It can only be surrendered to. So let me tell you what's really happening to the spiritually awake. They're disappearing from the noise because God is calling them into the silence. They're vanishing from the crowds because the wilderness is where transformation happens. They're going quiet on social media because they're learning to speak with God in prayer. The real awakening isn't disappearing, it's being purified. God is doing what He's always done. He's separating the wheat from the chaff. He's distinguishing between those who want spiritual entertainment and those who want Him. He's dividing the seekers from the consumers, the disciples from the crowds, the awakened from the merely curious. And if you're feeling that pull, that holy discontent, that divine dissatisfaction with spiritual superficiality, that's not depression. That's not spiritual failure. That's God calling you home. He's calling you out of the cheap awakening and into the real one, out of the comfortable prison and into the terrifying freedom of actual surrender, out of the spiritual marketplace and into the sacred solitude where He meets His children. But you have to choose it. You have to turn off the noise. You have to step away from the feed. You have to resist the comfortable numbness that's masquerading as peace. You have to disappear from the world's systems so you can appear in God's presence. So what does this look like practically? It means scheduling silence the way you schedule meetings. It means treating prayer like it's more important than your inbox. It means choosing 1 hour with God over 10 hours of spiritual content consumption. It means getting alone, really alone. Not alone with your phone on silent, not alone with a podcast playing, but alone, stripped of all the artificial stimulation we use to avoid confronting our own souls. It means reading scripture until it reads you, staying with one passage until it breaks you open, rather than consuming chapter after chapter like spiritual fast food. It means finding a spiritual community, not an audience, but a family. People who will look you in the eye and tell you the truth. Who will pray with you, not just for you. Who will walk with you through the valley, not just celebrate with you on the mountaintop. It means embracing discomfort as a teacher rather than an enemy. Welcoming the dark night of the soul as a sacred passage rather than a problem to be solved. It means dying to your need for constant stimulation, instant gratification, and comfortable spirituality. It means choosing the narrow path that leads to life, even though it's harder, slower, and lonelier than the broad road everyone else is traveling. This isn't a call to religious performance. This isn't about doing more spiritual activities. This is about subtraction, not addition. It's about removing the barriers between you and God that you've constructed out of distraction, entertainment, and counterfeit awakening. Aldous Huxley was right about the problem. He saw the comfortable prison being constructed. He understood the power of distraction and artificial happiness to enslave the human soul. But he was wrong about the ending, because he didn't account for the fact that humans were made for something more than comfort, that we have eternity written on our hearts, that we were designed for a love so vast, so deep, so overwhelming, that no artificial substitute could ever truly satisfy. You can drug a person into forgetting their pain. You can distract them from their purpose. You can numb them to their divine calling. But you cannot erase the image of God from the human soul. And eventually, maybe after years of consuming spiritual content, maybe after decades of comfortable distraction, eventually that image starts to burn. That divine spark starts to ache. That holy hunger starts to gnaw. And when it does, no algorithm can satisfy it. No content can feed it. No entertainment can silence it. Only God can. The spiritually awake are disappearing from the noise because they're being drawn into the silence. They're vanishing from the crowds because they're being called into the wilderness. They're going quiet on the feeds because they're learning to hear the still small voice that can only be heard when everything else stops. And that voice is saying, come away with me, come into the place where I can actually reach you, where I can transform you, where I can awaken you to who you really are and who I've always been, So here's my question for you. Are you going to disappear into the noise, or are you going to disappear into God? Are you going to continue the comfortable spiritual consumption that never quite satisfies, or are you going to choose the uncomfortable awakening that transforms everything? Are you going to stay in the prison that Huxley warned about, the one decorated with spiritual imagery and enlightenment vocabulary, or are you going to walk out into the terrifying freedom of actual encounter with the living God? The choice is yours. It's always been yours. But understand this, neutrality is not an option. If you do nothing, the current will carry you. The algorithms will shape you. The comfortable numbness will claim you. The spiritually awake are disappearing, and you're either disappearing into distraction or disappearing into divine encounter. Choose. God is in the silence, waiting. He's been waiting your whole life, not with judgment but with longing, not with condemnation but with open arms. He's calling you out of Egypt, out of Babylon, out of the comfortable slavery that's killing your soul. Will you go? If this message opened your eyes, subscribe, because the next revelation will shake you even more. But more importantly, if this message awakened something in you, don't just consume it. Act on it today, now. Turn off this video, turn off your phone, and sit in silence with the God who made you. For 30 minutes, no agenda, no religious performance, just you and him. And see what happens when you stop disappearing into the noise and start appearing in his presence. The awakened ones aren't gone. They're just learning to be found in a new place. Will you join them?